about my personal egg freezing journey, which I went on about a year ago. I'm going to be discussing everything from what egg freezing is, the costs associated with freezing your eggs, what my day-to-day looked like, including the symptoms that I had, why I decided to freeze my eggs, and my thoughts and reflections a year later, whether or not I recommend somebody to go through the process. Do I have any regrets going through the process? Before we dive in, I ask that you hit the subscribe button. I'm making this video honestly because when I first started thinking about freezing my eggs, I had no clue what the process entailed. I just knew it was something I wanted to do. But I searched for stories from women who had gone through the process, and it wasn't a lot out there. And I know they could be for various reasons, but those stories that were out there, I was so thankful for them because they were so informative to me, and I felt much more empowered going through the process. And I just really hope that this is a resource, and as more and more people talk about the process, more and more people will open up about it. I know it's a very intimate and personal journey, and I honestly struggle with sharing my story, but I do think that fertility is an issue that needs to be discussed more openly. So sit back. I hope you enjoy it. A little bit about me. I'm 35 now, and I was 34 when I went through the egg freezing process. However, it was before I ever turned 30 when I first started considering freezing my eggs. But as the old saying goes, life happened and I didn't follow through at that time. But I knew I wanted to look into the egg freezing option because I was very career focused. I wanted to travel a lot, and there were certain other goals that I wanted to achieve before I started thinking about family planning. And another big thing for me personally, I wasn't married, so I knew that children just weren't in my near future. And honestly, I didn't want to be on anybody's timeline. I wanted to have children when I wanted to have them. And society tells you you have to have children before you turn 35 because that's when the average woman's fertility begins to decline. And we know this person specific because you can have somebody that's 36 that has better fertility than somebody that's 33. But generally, that is when your egg quality begins to diminish. And as time goes, you have less and less eggs. So while it's not impossible to have children after the age of 35, it is a little harder to become pregnant. So what is egg freezing? I'm about to give you a very high level overview of what the egg freezing process is based on my own personal research and having gone through the process. But I'm not by any stretch of the imagination a healthcare provider. So I highly recommend if you're considering freezing your eggs, go and speak with a fertility specialist as soon as possible. Even if you aren't considering freezing your eggs, but you're curious about where your fertility stands, still go and speak with a fertility specialist because knowledge is power and it can inform your decision. So egg freezing process is pretty much on average about a 10 to 14 day process where you're injected with hormones. And these hormones cause multiple eggs to grow and mature at one time. And we know as women, when we're going through a cycle, only one egg grows. And if it's not fertilized, once it matures, it gets released. But during this process, multiple ones are growing at the same time, and you have to go to the clinic several times to get monitored. And that essentially means that you have to go and get blood work done as well as a vaginal ultrasound. And during the vaginal ultrasound, they measure the growth of the eggs. And once the eggs get to a good size to where they can be retrieved, you have to take what's called the trigger injection. And what that trigger injection does, it signals to the eggs, okay, it's time for y'all to go. So exactly 36 hours after you take the trigger injection, you go in, you have a procedure where you have to go under anesthesia. And what they do is they go in and retrieve the eggs from your body. And those eggs that are mature, they get frozen and they dispose of the ones that are not mature. And the number that you get is really dependent upon your body, how you respond to the medication. I've heard of some women getting as low as 4 eggs frozen, but I've also heard of a lot of women getting 20 plus eggs frozen. So it's really all just dependent upon your body. We can't have a conversation about the egg freezing process without acknowledging the costs associated with freezing your eggs. And I personally believe that the cost is one of the number one reasons that women just don't go through the process because it is a very expensive process. It can run you anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000. And a lot of people just don't have that type of money sitting around, but it varies by location, the amount of medicine that you take. So call your local fertility clinic and just ask them what the costs are associated with going through the process and what the cost covers. It costs the process itself, the lab work that you get done, and also the medication that you have to take throughout the process. And there's also another fee associated with freezing your eggs, which is called the storage fee. It's an annual fee that you pay to keep your eggs frozen. And at the point that you decide you no longer want to keep the eggs frozen, you want them to be disposed of or donated, then you don't have to pay the annual fee anymore. But on average, it's about $500 to $600. My storage fee is $600. But if egg freezing is something that you're interested in, if you're able to, I would encourage you to start saving now. That's what I did. I started a separate savings account or bucket to my savings account where I put money in because I knew I wanted to go through the process. But I was one of the fortunate ones where my employer announced like a few months before I went through the process, but after I went to my initial consultation, that they were getting fertility benefits. And I was just overjoyed because I had been saving for it. I didn't really want to dedicate that money to that, but I knew it's something I wanted to do. But so I say, if you're interested in freezing your eggs, go and speak with your benefits department and see if this is an option, because more and more employers are adding that as a benefit. So we talked about what egg freezing is and the costs associated with freezing your eggs. So I'm about to talk about my personal journey and what that looked like. It started with a consultation with my local fertility clinic. I set up an appointment and I went and spoke with a healthcare provider about my family planning goals, the number of children I wanted to have, and she talked with me about the number of eggs that I would need to have frozen to result in the number of children I want to have. And one of the things that she explained to me is for every 8 eggs that are frozen, there is likely to result in 1 live birth. So if you want to have 3 children, a good number of frozen eggs to have is 24. If you want to have 2 children, then a good number of eggs to have is 16, and so on and so forth. And this is because even though you may have some frozen eggs, the eggs have to go through so many steps until it can result in a live birth, and some of them just may not survive. And we know this is not a foolproof method. Freezing your eggs does not guarantee you being able to have a child, but it is a way to increase those chances. One of the other things that she talked to me about is a list of vitamins that she recommended I started to take because she said they help with egg quality, and you don't have to be trying to become pregnant or even going through the egg freezing process to start taking these vitamins. They're just regular vitamins you can go get at the local drugstore and start taking them, and they will improve your egg quality. So from there, the second part of the consultation, I was supposed to come back and get some lab work done and a vaginal ultrasound, but I didn't do it because I was 33 at the time when I had the initial consultation. But 34 came and I was like, okay, I need to get serious about this. I keep saying I'm going to do it. So I booked the second half of it. And what happened at that appointment, I got some lab work done where they drew some blood, and then I got a vaginal ultrasound, and they're pretty much looking at to make sure that there's nothing going on that won't result in a successful egg freezing cycle. So they did that. And after I did the vaginal ultrasound, I did what's called the Lupron Challenge test. And that's where they inject you with some hormones. And you have to come back exactly 24 hours later and get more blood work done. And based on that blood work, they'll be able to measure how your body responded to the hormones. And based on that, they'll determine the dosage of medicine and the type of medicine that you'll take once you're going through the egg freezing cycle. So I set up an appointment for a week or two later after I'd gone through the second part of the consultation to speak with the healthcare provider about my test results. And she pretty much told me that the vaginal ultrasound didn't show anything that was concerning to them. As far as the Lupron Challenge test, she did reveal that my body did not respond to the hormones as well as they would have liked them to. And she also told me that my ovarian reserve level was slightly less than average for someone my age, which was 34 at the time. So I was honestly a little bummed about it, but I came back to my life's resolve that God is in control. And if it's meant for me to have biological children, He'll make it happen. But I do want to say I had the test done a little later because sometimes they tell you just to retake it. And my ovarian reserve number was much better. So I don't know why that is. The doctor said that Maybe it's because sometimes our body just don't respond well when we're under stress. So maybe I was stressed out during that time and my body just wasn't responding well to the hormone injections. And I was less stressed at the second time. So it did respond better. But either way, everything was good to go. So they connected me with the IVF coordinator and we set up a time that we can talk. And for those of you who don't know, because I'm not sure if I knew this, egg freezing is the first half of the IVF procedure. So if you have to ever go through the IVF procedure, egg freezing is the first half of it. So I met with my IVF coordinator and she prescribed me some birth control and she ordered the medications that I would need to take during the egg freezing process. And when the medication came, y'all, I was honestly overwhelmed when I saw the amount of medicine in the box. I'm like, what is this? It was so many vials of medicine, so many different types of needles, things like that. But my IVF coordinator, she was great. She was amazing. We set up a Zoom call and she went over various medicines with me. She told me which needles went with which medications, how to mix certain medicines, because there were medicines that you had to mix together right before you took the injections. Honestly, there were certain days where I felt like I was in potions class at Hogwarts, but she explained all of that and I felt much better about the process. And another thing, you have to take antibiotics and aspirin throughout the entire process, in addition to the vitamins that I talked about a little while ago. So on to the fun part, shots. That's what I get the most questions about. One of the things that surprised me, honestly, is when I got ready to do the first injection, I got really nervous and I froze up. One of my coworkers was in my office and she was just like, Cynthia, just do it. And I did it. And it was totally fine. It did burn a little bit, but it was fine. I don't know why I was so nervous because I've never been nervous about shots before. I have tattoos, so obviously I'm not scared of needles, but for whatever reason, the thought of giving my own self a shot just kind of freaked me out a little bit. So on day one, I had 2 injections in the morning and 2 injections at night. And so here's a sneak peek into what the rest of the days look like. Sometimes it's not as bad, and sometimes it's like, oh, get it over with. And that's one of those times where it's just like, just get it over with. That hurt a lot. Guys, so it's day 4 and I'm getting ready to do my evening injections. And just kind of to recap my day, I had my first follow-up appointment since I started the injections, and pretty much all they did was they drew some blood and they also did a vaginal ultrasound. And I think this is just to kind of see if my body was responding to the hormones and if they need to up the dosage of hormones. I did hear back though from my coordinator and she said that things look really well, so I'm hopeful. I'm just praying that my body continues to respond to the hormones, that my follicles grow, and that my eggs mature so that I can have a lot of eggs at the end of this cycle. Oh, also I did get some new medication because I noticed the other day that when I was counting the number of vials that I had left for one of the medications, I noticed that I was going to run out on a Sunday. So I called the pharmacy and they were able to overnight it, and I got it today. And so that's just something to be aware of. Pay attention to your dosage and how much you have left, because you don't want to run out and be unable to get what you need. And I know a lot of clinics, emergency medicines that you can come and get from them and maybe replace. I'm not exactly sure how it works, but you don't want to run into a problem like I would have. On a Sunday, you run out of medicine and nobody's available to get you some medicine. So that's just something to kind of be aware of. And also, I'm starting a new injection this weekend, so we'll see how that goes. Day 6 here. So far, no huge symptoms beyond the injection site soreness. It's getting a little more difficult to find a place that I haven't recently stuck myself. And my hat totally goes off to people who have to have injections every day for a medical reason. Also on today, I start a new injection. In addition to the AM and PM injections, I have to do one at noon. Okay, so there was a malfunction with my needle. It was leaking the entire time I was putting the medicine in. Day 9, and today is actually my last day of injections. I got a message about an hour ago from my IVF coordinator. She said that everything was looking good and I am still set to do the retrieval on Friday. So this evening I have to do the trigger shot after I finish my regular injections at a specific time at exactly 8:30, so that Friday morning at 8:30 I can be ready to do the retrieval. So I'm really excited to be on the downhill of this process. I haven't had any major symptoms. The biggest thing, I've been tired a lot lately. Not a lot of bloating or any other type of adverse reactions or anything like that to the medicine. And I am officially done with all of my injections. Ooh, this one's bleeding. I will say this needle was a little harder to pierce the skin. It's retrieval day. Yesterday, which was day 9, it went pretty smoothly. There were no injections because I went and got lab work done, and the only thing I would have had to do was take another trigger shot if the one I took the other day did not work. But the lab work showed that it took well. I didn't have to take another trigger shot, so I'm excited about putting the cycle to an end, and I'm hoping for a ton of eggs. Talk about recovery. That was the hardest part of the process for me personally. I had some extreme bloating, some cramping, some extreme constipation, and I was really fortunate that my retrieval took place on a Friday because I had the weekend to somewhat recover, but this lasted about 3 to 4 days, and I was like, okay, this is a lot. Even, I don't know if a lot of people go through this, but the first time I went and tried to pee after I had the retrieval done, it hurt a lot. So I was like, what did I get myself into? But it went away after about 3 to 4 days. I was good to go. It was like I never even had a procedure done. A question I get asked a lot is, am I happy I went through the process? And I tell people absolutely. In hindsight, it was not that long of a process. It is very time consuming. So if you're considering freezing your eggs, make sure it's between a 2-week time frame where you don't have to be out of town. I did it while I still work full time. I didn't have to take off work because I got my appointments at like 7:30 a.m. So I would do that and then I would go to work after my appointments. And luckily, I did take one day off because I had to take off that Friday, and the biggest part of the recovery was over the weekend. But it is a very time consuming process to go through, but I'm so happy I went with it. I don't feel the pressure of, oh, I got to have a child soon because my fertility is declining. I hope that I never have to use my frozen eggs, but if for whatever reason I do, they're there and I don't have to think about it. So if you're even thinking about freezing your eggs or just curious about it, or if it's something that you've been toying with in the back of your mind, go and speak to a fertility specialist. I highly recommend, if you have the resources and you can do it, do it. And I would say do it earlier than later because you may have better results if you do it earlier. I had good results and I was 34 at the time, so don't feel like, oh, I'm not 28, I'm not 25, I'm not 24 or 30. You can still do it at 34 years old. I did it and I'm happy with my results. If you do decide to go through the process, I highly recommend that you have a support system around you. I've heard stories of women who their hormones caused them to become very emotional. That was not one of the side effects that I had, but I do know that it happens. But even if you don't have that, having a support system is very important. And even if you feel like, oh, well, I don't want people to judge me or anything like that, well, you don't have to tell them. It's a process that you can go through by yourself if you choose to do that. And honestly, Don't worry about people's opinions. It's you, your life, and you get to choose to do what you think is best for you. So look into it. Definitely do it if it's something that you can do. I hope this video has been very helpful. If it has, I ask that you like it and share it with people, and also subscribe. See y'all later.